Vinter. I'm a Googler, and you're in Google. And on behalf of Google, I'd like to welcome you to Google. So now, as I was looking at this, I noticed that the Google logo has got gigantic letters, and the Charles River Conservancy has little tiny letters, but a really cool picture. Okay, so I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I just want to point that out. That's the first thing I noticed up there. The reason it has a really cool picture is because the Charles River Conservancy does an amazing thing for our community in protecting and preserving and celebrating the amazing Charles River. And I think what you're going to get a sense of tonight is a little bit of some of the work that they do. And I'm very proud to have Google be a partner with Renata and the Charles River Conservancy to help them increase the storytelling about the river. And tonight, we're obviously celebrating the River Story Volume 3, which is just some amazing work, and you're going to hear from some of the incredible authors that contributed to it. But we're also going to introduce you to the first ever River Stories Live event, and we were trying to think what made it live, because these people have always been live, so it doesn't seem like that alone should be worthy of making it live. But one of the ideas that we actually don't know who had the idea, who created it, so we don't know who to give credit to, was what if we took the technology that Google uses for Street View and actually tried to capture some of the imagery around the Charles River. And so we have this thing called a trekker, which is something that a trekker actually puts on their back and has an amazing set of cameras above it. And then you start trekking, and it captures that experience. And so what we're going to show you behind me is what some of those photos are. So the live part is going online with trying to capture some of the Charles River with photographs that we hope can be almost as rich as the amazing watercolors that are in Volume 3 of the River Stories. So again, I thank you for coming, and it's my great pleasure to introduce the Charles River Conservancy's founder and president. Did I get that right? Renata von Charner. And I got her name right too. I just want to say I've been practicing her name all afternoon, so I feel very good.
Thank you, Steve Winter. And thank you, Google, for hosting us tonight. I think we are very lucky to be here in this beautiful space and to have this wonderful reception. And thank you all for coming. And yes, it's called River Stories Live because we have the authors live, and we have live images. It's now actually live on the air. But we also have with us tonight the people who made River Stories such an amazing publication. And tonight we will be hearing from the authors, but I also want to acknowledge some of the visual artists because that is such a rich element. And I know Frank Costatino, maybe you want to just raise your hand. He's here with his 3 sons. We are so lucky to have Frank work. He has not only done the cover and the bridges in the Charles River, in the River Stories, but he also illustrated the Vision 2020 for the Esplanade. He's working on the lock area. I think Frank has drunk the lemonade. And thank you very much for all your wonderful work. We have Tom Gastel here, who did the architectural plan of he's there. He's also a swimmer. He's wearing a swimming T-shirt. He's a multi-talented man. Caroline Neuberger, who is here, who did the wonderful collage of the Mystic and the Charles River, and she actually did the cover of River Stories too. And we also have June Vernon here, who did 2 pieces of collage, and she also worked as a researcher. Thank you very much. And that brings me to the people who put River Stories together. You all have seen Evan Bradley. He was in the Globe carrying in the trekker. He has become the trekker man of the Conservancy. Evan, he might be in the tech room. He's he's right there. Thank you, Evan. And Teresa Doherty, she was the project coordinator. She's not here tonight. Brent Whelan, who was the both editor and outreach person. Where is Brent? He is right here. Many of you have been in touch with him. And we have S.J. Port, our Director of Communication. She's there. She worked at the final stages. And Julia Giordana, she might be not in the room. She was welcoming people. So if you haven't purchased your Christmas gifts for your 500 best friends, here is your chance in River Stories. But of course, no project can come together without also having some financial support. And we have Catherine Hester is here from InterSystem. Thank you so much, InterSystem. We have been very grateful for your support over the years, and now for also for your help with River Stories. And Charles River Apparel is here. We have both Deb and Barry Lipsit, who are the owners of Charles River Apparel. Thank you for your support, and it's great that we were able to partner on that together. And Cambridge Trust Company, I see they have a branch right across, but they have a party tonight, so they couldn't be here, but they also helped us. So River Stories Live. River Stories has been a wonderful effort for the Conservancy because it brings all of those people together. You might have seen the quotes in the publication. Because we want people to fall in love with the river, and what you have done helps people fall in love, because our mission is to make the parklands more active, attractive, and accessible. And we feel there's no better way than to do that with people who care about the river, and you only care about something that you really love. So it's a love fest, and I'm grateful that you're here tonight, and it's now up to Tom Ashbrook. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renata, and thank you, Steve, and hello?
Who needs no introduction?
Thank you.
Anyway, hi. It's really nice to be with all of you, and thank you, Renata, and thank you, Steve. It's so nice to be out on an evening celebrating something that everyone is just happy to celebrate. I mean, it's a love fest so easily. And these days, that is very welcome, when everyone can just say, yeah, and jump in the water and be happy. It's terrific. I can't wait to talk with all of the wonderful people on stage who have contributed to this very beautiful book put together by the Conservancy, and also think about some ideas for the future of the river. We each have our own relationship with it. There's probably so many things in common. I fell in love with it immediately. I don't know about your first memories of the Charles River, but when you come to Boston, it just leaps out at you, and it's never stopped being that kind of vein of nature and life and freedom and openness and the sense of access to everything that's out of the kind of humdrum of daily life. I wrote just a little bit about kayaking on the river with my kids. It was a rite of passage in our family to kayak from up in Newton down to MIT, where their mom was working. And we would do it when they were 9 or 10 years old, and they had such a feeling of accomplishment to paddle on their own agency, their own power down the river to their, and be treated as a hero when they got to MIT. It was fantastic. I had a son who rowed on the river with community rowing, and it was such a great feeling to stand up high above the river somewhere, just on its edge, and see him in the dusk doing this down the river. It's a beautiful thing. A son who had a rehearsal dinner before his wedding on the river with relatives and friends from all over the world. And I'll never forget my French father-in-law playing his harmonica, La Vie en Rose, out on the river after a few glasses of wine in the night. Picnics with babies along the river, and that stretch of sycamore trees behind the Kennedy School up by Harvard. I grew up with sycamores, and the scent of those trees along the river are very dear to me. Joys and sometimes prayers and sorrow along this river, but it's a place that takes us all in, that embraces us and opens the city up in such a beautiful way. And I'm so grateful to the Conservancy for celebrating it and improving it and reminding us all of its presence and its power and making it better for all of us. So thank you very much. Yes, let's applaud that. I had this terrific panel of people who contributed here. Henry David Thoreau and Longfellow and Anne Sexton could not make it this evening. But I think we did all right. We'll be hearing from each of them a little bit about what they wrote to share with you and their thoughts on it as it has matured in the bottle here since they first probably handed it in a year and a half ago or whenever it was. And then we'll do a second round when I come back to them. And some of them have ideas or thoughts about things they might like to see for the river as it is kind of stewardship that we must have for the river, whether we acknowledge it or accept it or not. I mean, we're the ones alive here now, and the river is always alive here now. So it really is our responsibility to care for it. And I'm eager to hear their thoughts on that front as well. We're going to hear maybe 3 minutes or so from each about what they've written, and then we'll come and do some more of that. After that, we've got another round of commentators who will broaden our conversation a little bit, talking about some of the Conservancy's projects and concerns. And then at the end of this lovely evening, there will be coffee and dessert, just like magic when you walk back out. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers for the evening. Liza Ketchum is author of numerous books for children and Charles River watershed volunteer. She's going to talk about her experience reintroducing shad to the Charles. Let's applaud that. Let me go right down the row so everyone, you know who we're looking at, and then we can dive in. Peter Howe is business editor and host at New England Cable News, former environmental writer for the Boston Globe. He'll talk about efforts to clean up the Charles in the 1990s. Hold your applause, please. We'll go on down the line here. Nancy C. Scholes, independent scholar, author of Gaining Ground, a history of land making in Boston, the very origins of Boston in so many ways. We'll talk about the process of building the Charles River Basin as we know it, a great project of human effort. Florence Ladd, novelist, poet, former director of the Bunting Institute at Harvard, will talk about her Charles River poems and read for us tonight, head of the Charles. And Ferdy Hellweger, professor of civil and environmental engineering at Northeastern University, will talk about efforts to build better computer models of the Charles for management of water quality. And finally, Megan Marshall, Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer of the fabulous Margaret Fuller, will talk about her experiences of rowing and sailing on the river as a newly arrived college student. All of this lies before us. Liza, let me come first to you.
Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Is it on? Okay, great. Well, hello everyone, and thank you, Renata, so much for organizing this and for inviting me and others to participate in this anthology. And I agree with you, the artwork is such a big part of this. And I love it that one of the artists' last name is La Riviere. That seemed really appropriate. Renata asked us if we wanted to speak about what inspired us to write our particular essay. And the inspiration for me came from watching an event at the Charles River watershed about farther out than the Google cameras could go, a release of 200,000 shad larvae into the river. And I've always been fascinated by creatures that are born one place, go out into the world and come back to the place where they were born, sea turtles and many birds and salmon and shad. And so when she invited me to write this piece, and I had just been to see the shad release, I thought, oh, perfect. I don't have to search for a topic. As soon as the shad were in this huge, enormous tank, and they were about this, to me they look like little commas on the page. Maybe that's because I'm a writer. And they were put into the river through a hose, big hose from the back of from this huge tank. And from that moment, the Fish and Wildlife people told us they would imprint on that spot in the river and want to come back to it to spawn. So I was very excited to think of them going into the river, but also a bit sad to think of the obstacles they would face when they came back. And one of them is one of the biggest being the Watertown Dam, which is a place where I walk a couple times a week and always go and see the herring run in the spring. And I know how hard it is for the fish to get over there. There was another moment of serendipity that happened yesterday, and I see Bob Zimmerman and Liza here. I was invited to attend a brown bag lunch with two fish experts talking about the shad in the river. And so I actually threw out what I was going to say tonight, because what happened there, it was fascinating talk. And I wish they could be here tonight, actually. But these two guys, one federal, one state, have figured out a way to track the grown shad who are coming back up the river. And they put these little, I don't know what you would actually call it. It's a transponder, really, inside. They figured out a way to surgically insert it into the fish. And then along the river and out in the harbor, they have little buoys that allow them to track individual fish. And I think, Liza, you said they tried to do 48, but they ended up with 46. So it's a very small sample. But none of the shad made it past the dam. Many of them got to the Galen Street Bridge. The locks are a problem. Mainly they discovered for the fish trying to go back out, I think. So the other thing about the shad is they're fussy. And they don't like the shallow water. There is a fish ladder on the dam, but they don't like the shallow water. They like to be in the warmer water and the deeper water. So it's very hard for them to get up the fish ladder. So that's when we get to what we'd like to do about the river. I'd love to see the dam torn down, but right. Just quickly, the success story is that tens of thousands of herring are making it up the river, and there was a scientist they mentioned yesterday who said, I think his name was Belding. He predicted that in 1921 that the Charles River would, he called it, blink out, and it did for a while, but certainly it has come back, and I think that's a great success. And the thousands of fish that are going up the river are a good sign of that.
Bravo. Liza,
yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't ready for a tragedy there. I was all invested in 200,000 imprinted shad. And then zero. Not even one, not even Nemo. Okay. Okay. Peter, take us away.
So I also want to thank Renata and everybody associated with this magnificent piece of work. I can tell you how incredibly flattering it is to have a piece with your byline alongside Longfellow and Sexton and so beautifully, just top shelf, top to bottom, the artwork, the presentation, everything. I will also tell you, as a former Boston Globe reporter who now works for NECN, New England Cable News, one of the things that you often get from people is they think when you go from newspaper to TV, that means, oh, well, great. So now you don't have to write anything anymore. Now you just read stuff that people hand you. And it's like, well, I wish that were, in fact, the case. But basically, everything you hear me say on TV is something that I've written. The spontaneous interaction with the anchor woman is something I've written, et cetera, et cetera. So
Really? La, 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 la. We don't want to know this. That's the best you could do. You wrote that? Sorry. Sorry.
So
just kidding.
For me to get a chance to write what I would consider, a real piece of writing as opposed to a 90-second TV script was greatly satisfying.
Yeah.
Being around Tom Ashbrook, Renee Loth, and thinking of myself as part of this community we call the Globe diaspora, all the people who used to work for the Globe who don't anymore. Back in the day, we would have basically referred to the piece that I wrote as, quote, a clip job, where you go back and you pull all your clips that you've written on something, and then, or that other people have written on something, and then turn those into a story. And so in this case, it was a chance for me to go back and pull my own clips, all these stories that I've written over the years about the Charles River. This came as I turned 50 this summer, which is, some people out there I think have been through this as well. It's a great time when you, feel like you want to take some stock of the first half century of your life. B, if you're like me, you hide under the bed for the day until it's no longer your 50th birthday and you move on. But it was, I realized what an extraordinary blessing it was for me to have been a newsman in the same city my entire adult life, and to write about things that actually wound up coming true. And one of my favorite images that will come around on this wheel from the Trekker is the pedestrian bicycle bridge that goes from North Point, Cambridge, over to Paul Revere Park in Charlestown. I invested a huge amount of my life in writing about something called Scheme Z, which you may remember from the Big Dig.
Flashback.
And basically, what that bridge is the one silver lining to the whole Scheme Z battle. Or there's more than that, but that is the success that Scheme Z would have prevented. And I think that bridge is so extraordinarily important in what it does with connecting Charlestown, Cambridge, connecting the whole basin to the harbor. So it's a story that's sort of a meta story about all the different people that I got to talk to over the years, heroes that I met, people who slugged away, and it's a story that, thank God, has a happy ending. It's far from perfect. There are dams that need to be torn down, but it was wonderful to look back and realize I was helping chronicle the great work of so many committed people who've done so much good to make this river a jewel right in the heart of the city. And do we talk now about sort of
ideas?
A place?
Hold them.
Good.
Ideas. Hold on to your
I will
ideas.
hold on
Put the harness, the bridle on there. I know it's hard. Peter Howe, it's wonderful. Thank you very much. I remember your story so well. I mean, I thank you for all those years that you've written about the river and the environment here. But Scheme Z, it always made me think of Dr. Seuss. Like, you'd finally get to Scheme Z, and then little, I don't know, shad larvae would come and like do stuff. But thank you for your work over all these years. It's just wonderful. Peter Howe. Nancy Seashoals, regale us.
Oh, dear. Well, actually, I thought I was going to be talking about specific shots that I'd asked for so I could explain what it is I wanted to say.
Would you like this one? Do you like this shot here? Or?
I like them all.
Okay.
So what I have to say may not be related to what you see on the screen, but I'll try to make it clear. And, of course, thank you so much, Renata, for inviting me. This is a lot of fun, and the book is beautiful. It's my Christmas present for all my family. The major focus of my research has been all the filling that was done to create the land that was in Boston, or that is now Boston, that Boston's now on. And of that, the Charles River is one of the centerpieces because, as I'm sure you know, the Charles River Basin is an artificial construct. It didn't used to be like this at all. In fact, it was originally a great, huge tidal estuary, much larger than it is now. It encompassed all of what's now Back Bay, a lot of the South End, and the area of Cambridge where MIT is. What changed it into the freshwater basin we know now is, no, it's not on the screen, but anyway, the first Charles River Dam, which is where the Museum of Science is. That was built between 1905 and 1910. The reason for building the dam was to deal with a major pollution problem. During almost all of the 19th century, Boston sewers discharged sewage at the nearest shoreline, raw sewage. From there, it was supposed to be taken away by the outgoing tide. Actually, a lot of it came back on the incoming tide and sat festering on the flats at low tide. So, by the end of the 19th century, these flats were extremely polluted, very odoriferous, and a source of disease at a time when people thought the diseases were caused by bad smells. Actually, at the time that the dam was proposed, malaria had also become a big problem in the Charles River Basin. So they thought of several solutions for this, but the one that they finally adopted was to build the dam where the Museum of Science is now, and to turn the Charles River into a freshwater basin. That is, it was going to hold back all the water that was coming downstream, which was fresh, and to maintain it at a constant height, which would keep all of those polluted flats always covered with water. This is what I call the out of sight, out of smell solution to pollution. So that's why the dam was built. Meanwhile, on the sides, a lot of filling had been taking place over the years. It had started way back around the edges of Back Bay in the early 19th century. I'm sure you all know that Back Bay itself is a major land-making project. And that had all ended with seawalls, which I was hoping to show you, but that's not what's on the screen right now. Anyway, and then, and so they formed this basin with seawalls on the Boston and the Cambridge side. They'd also, at that point, had built a seawall in front of where MIT and all along the Esplanade there, and filled behind it. What they then discovered, they thought they were creating a water park, somewhat like the Ulster Basin in Hamburg, Germany. But then they found that the wind coming across this basin that they had created kicked up so many big waves that it wasn't good for rowing and it wasn't good for small boats, and the shore was too narrow for many boathouses. They had created the first part of the Esplanade as part of the dam project. So in the 1930s, they added more to it, and they sloped the edges down to the shore rather than ending them in seawalls, which is why when you walk along the Charles River Basin, you'll see the edges slope down to the shore. And then when they took the first part of the Esplanade that they had filled in the early 1950s and put Storrow Drive on it, they then added some islands and lagoons to compensate for it. So that is a very quick history of how the Charles River Basin got created. Any more?
Thank you, Nancy. I have to, your book, I mean, we all knew that this was how things were created, but your book was a revelation to me in its specificity, and I still carry all those images, and I'm so grateful for them to see how it all emerged from that malarial shit show into what is this splendid, relatively splendid thing that we have now. And I always think of how many mules pulled, how many shovels and graders along there to make all that happen for how many years. It's just really mind-blowing.
Well, they dredged a lot of the fill, so a lot of it was
Still, just to get that grade, that slope, everything there, all the muscle power that went into that back in the day. Thank you. Nancy C. Schultz, shall we do this thing? Florence, take us away, madam.
I live in Cambridge, where we sometimes refer to the river as the River Charles. The river, by night and by day, is fascinating. The lighting on the bridge of the Weeks Bridge, the lighting under it, around it, has brought life to the river at night. Seasonally, the river draws us. My warmest memory and a coldest memory occurred in the winter of 1971, and some of you may remember that the river froze, and froze solid enough for some of us in the afternoon, a Sunday afternoon, to take a promenade on the river.
Wow. And
their hands up back there, people who remember. I startle people when I tell them that Jack Ladd and I went for a walk with the infant Michael tied on my back, walked on ice. One of the poems that I've contributed is about a winter scene, about a woman I saw who walked across the river 3 or 4 winters ago when it didn't appear solid enough to sustain her, but it sustained the interest of a lot of people who were looking on. I was one of the onlookers, and one of the poems I've contributed came from that moment. In every season, there's something on the Charles to draw us. On May Day, I have seen Renata there at dawn. On May Day, I'm there very often with a group of Harvard students from Lowell House in black tie and formal dress for the May Day waltz on the Weeks Bridge. And Renata comes along with a huge group of, are they?
Revelers.
Revelers, yes, in all kinds of dress. And it's a marvelous celebration of the May and of the river. What draws some of us to the river are the rowers and the way in which they glide up and down, bringing activity to the Charles. I'm a great fan of rowing and a particular fan of the head of the Charles, when there's a crescendo of activity on the river and on the banks of the river, when people come from all over the world, in fact, for that event. The poem I contributed, called Head of the Charles, is one I'd like to read. Thank you. Head of the Charles. On the Charles River, rippled by October's bracing breeze, rowers in sleek sculls and shells, their oars slice the water with disciplined elegance, racing upriver, but for what? To break records, earn a prize or praise of cheering coaches, friends, and family, or merely to know the delicious harmony of supple bodies and smooth strokes, composing new water music. Thank you.
Oh, oh, Florence, lad, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Florence. You know, my favorite sound in the world is running water. But tonight, I think I would just like to listen to you go on. That was so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Waltzing and Renata at dawn on the river. And beautiful. Wow, thank you. Ferdy, take us away.
Yes, so this was a different experience for me. I'm used to writing quite a bit in my work, but the type of writing that I do tends to be equations and tables with numbers. And luckily, Renata has some very talented people working for her that bounced these things back at me and said no. So it underwent quite a bit of revision. And what I ended up writing about was the model that we're developing to support swimming in the Charles. And I think this is really exciting. For me, the fact that we're going to be able to actually swim in this river. And it's a bit of a crazy idea. If you tell people, we're sampling here to test the quality for a potential beach, they end up looking at you as some sort of a nut job rather than take you serious, considering the history of pollution that the river has experienced. But the fact is, it's getting cleaner, thanks to many, many years of work of a lot of people. And it's now at a point where it's swimmable most of the time. And a number of people are working on actually seriously opening up a permanent swimming location under the leadership of the Conservancy. And so that's good news. The not so good news is that it's not swimmable 100% of the time. So, and that's something we're going to have to live with. And so we're going to need some sort of a management system. You can't let the people get into the water when the bacteria levels are high. Now, you may say, okay, this is a simple problem. Just go out and measure the water quality and tell us if it's okay to jump in. The problem is that the analysis that we have to do to test the water, it's a bacterial analysis. It takes 24 hours, basically. We have to go to the lab, incubate them, filter them, things like that. And so I can go out and collect a sample, but I won't be able to tell you if it's swimmable now until tomorrow. So it's not much use for that. So that's sort of where our model comes in. What our model does is it's a mathematical model. It accounts for the currents, the mixing, all of the input of bacteria from the sewers and the runoff. And it makes predictions in real time. So it predicts what's happening now, because we can't measure what's happening now, and that's called nowcasting. And we hope that that's going to be able to help us manage the beach, manage the management of the beach. We can do other things with it. We can play games with it. We can see what happens if we change the operation of the dam to maybe flush out the pollutants a little bit faster during the day when people want to go swimming, or clean up, or magically have every dog walker pick up after their dog for some reason. And it's quite some fun. So I think of my model more like a computer game, or imaginary river, or somewhat like an imaginary friend. And unfortunately, there's still a lot that we don't understand, and if you don't understand it, you can't put it into the river. And so many times when we make a prediction, we may go out and we may see that there's some sort of a bloom going on right now, and we just really don't have any clue of why. So there's a lot of research that we still need to do.
Awesome. Ferdy Hellweger, thank you very much. I could listen to you all night for a guy of numbers. It's like a Zen cone. You'll predict what's happening now. That is so cool. I mean, we can't even eat at Chipotle. I don't know how we can swim in your nowcast with your imaginary river friend. It's awesome. You scientists are really kooky. It's great. Thank you very much. Megan, sweep us on.
Well, I felt very lucky to have Renata ask me to contribute to this publication just when she did. I had finished, after 6 or 7 years, writing about one of Cambridge's most important residents, Margaret Fuller, who was born in Cambridgeport in 1810, and her parents had met on the West Bridge, crossing from Cambridge to Boston, now the Longfellow Bridge. So she was really not just born, but her parents were also very Cantabrigian. She was not someone who particularly enjoyed Cambridge in the end. Her life took her off to Europe. She was a foreign correspondent in Rome during the Revolution of 1848, and sadly drowned in a shipwreck on the way back to the United States after that failed revolution. But at any rate, I'd spent 6 years writing about somebody else, and I was about to change to write about another woman of Cambridge, Elizabeth Bishop, the poet, who spent the last years of her life in Cambridge and in Boston, and I had been a student of hers at Harvard, and I had decided I was going to try to write a biography that was a little bit personal, and I was going to try to recall those times that I was in college and make that part of the story somehow. I wasn't sure how yet. So this request of Renata's to write for the publication came at a time when I was going to try to experiment with writing a little bit of memoir. And of course, the river, in some ways, I have to say, maybe didn't really draw me to Cambridge, but I think it kept me here. I had grown up in Southern California, where it was dry, dry, dry. Any river you saw, there was no water in it. My family had a summer cabin up in the Sierras at a great distance. It took us, I remember, 13 hours to drive up to this little cabin. And my daughter, Sarah Brown, who was a Googler, she's here, and she spent many summers also at this cabin. And there, it was on a lake. I loved the water. There was actually water nearby, and I learned to row and canoe and that sort of thing. So when I came to Cambridge, I thought, oh, here's this river. I'll just go out and try it. I talked my way into using a singles shell on the river. I thought I knew how to row, but I didn't. I nearly capsized, and then I went and joined the Cambridge, the Charles River boating, not to sail, but I thought I'd just go out and row the way I did on the lake. Wouldn't that be fun? And it was, as they've said, it was windy and it was big and the boat was heavy. It wasn't the same. And I really came to the conclusion that it was just the river being there that mattered so much to me. And it was a kind of reminder of how I was, although I've lived, now, I don't know, maybe 40 years in Cambridge and Boston, I do still feel like an outsider. And it's that outsider's view that I think enables me to be a biographer, to try to imagine myself into someone else's life. And so I'm grateful to the Cambridge and Boston and the river, and to Renata for getting me going in the memoir vein.
Wonderful. Megan Marshall, thank you so much. You know, we joked earlier about Thoreau and Sexton and so on, but really, on this dais, you have quite a collection. If you haven't read Megan's book on Margaret Fuller, it is just fantastic. There's so much good writing that's come right off this stage, but it's just fantastic. And Megan, I think it's good for New Englanders to be reminded there are areas where you have to drive 13 hours to your summer house. My God, that's out of New England. That's almost to Atlanta. That's a terrible idea. Anyway, this was so great. Now, we have some ideas on this dais as well for the river. And I know a few of you have raised your hand a bit to say you've got an idea. We've already heard just a titch of a couple of them, if others of you want to chime in. But let me circle back. And Liza, you were talking about bombing the Watertown Dam. Did I get that wrong?
I don't think I would bomb it, but I got just a few weeks ago, I got a newsletter from the Vermont Nature Conservancy, and it was all about deadbeat dams. And I thought that was a great description. And a deadbeat dam is one that has no purpose. And of course, the Watertown Dam did have a purpose. It was a mill dam. Before that, it was a fishing weir. But now it really does not have a purpose except for the pleasure of sitting by the water. But if there were no dam, there would still be rapids. It would still be nice to listen to. So I'm all for tearing it down so the shad could go up the river.
What would the downside of tearing it down be? Is there any? Is it needed now to hold up something, Watertown?
I think the DCR is the one, they're holding it up as far as
I mean, would
I
it
don't know if
change?
anybody's here from there,
I don't know, would a tsunami come down the river?
No, it's not, right, deadbeat dams are ones that are not used for flood control.
Okay.
And deadbeat dams are not used for hydropower or for drinking water. And the Watertown Dam isn't, Bob Zimmerman is nodding his head vigorously there, so it's...
And if you took it down and all the shad who had imprinted there, the 200,000
well, they could
never
go,
forgot,
well,
and
they'd
they'd
still
come
get
back.
to the next dam, wouldn't they?
Oh.
So they're...
And then they
Yeah.
die there?
No, well, they might spawn there. I mean, they might, who knows?
Well, that would be their commute, just back and forth from the Moody Street to... That's all right. Well, all right.
Anyway,
take down the Watertown Dam.
That's my, what did you call it, a loving... Renata, you said you wanted us to make a loving suggestion or something. So
A loving suggestion, take down the deadbeat dam. Peter, what have you got?
A shad that can say it's made it to Waltham. You know.
Yes. Get a tattoo in
That's
Waltham and go
shad
back.
heaven. My thought was very close to there, the old MBTA trolley barn. Why? You know, there's no tracks leading into it. Every time I go by, it's massively underutilized, and that whole sort of Galen Street coming into Watertown Square. Just imagine totally redoing that, reopening it, realigning the streets. That could be a truly spectacular reimagined place.
Picture something there. What would you, in its place, what would you see? Open space or a dance hall, a new totem pole lodge?
I think, well, certainly open space and kind of a grand entrance. I'm really not being snide. A grand entrance to Watertown Square. And, you know, a feeling of, and the whole area around there would be something better than, you know, a snowblower shop, cheap gas stations, totally empty car barn. I feel like it has fantastic potential.
I love it. Empty car barns must go. Done. Nancy?
I said I was going to listen to my colleagues.
Oh, yes, please. Fine. Listen away.
More festivals along the river. There's a
Yes,
river
yes.
festival in the summer.
Love fests and other festivals.
Well, and there could be temporary structures, carousels. There could be more visible events, more events that would bring people to the river, people of all ages, and especially children. We haven't talked about Canada geese.
And shotguns or landing pads or...
I'm very fond of the Canada goose, and it would be useful perhaps to have something other than things they leave behind to mark their contribution to the river view.
I'm trying to picture that. Food coloring? Okay, I'm going to just ponder that. But thank you, Florence. I love the festival idea. I really agree. And carousels and other sort of festive structures, I think, that would say, come hither and it's warm now, or it's ice time and let's, of course, it doesn't freeze that often, not since '71. But Freddie, what have you got?
So I was thinking, I think my idea is going to be resonating sort of with the Google Street View type of a theme, is that it's more along the line of cyberspace and understanding, and it has to do with the model that we're developing. And the idea is that we can have high-resolution maps and forecasts of water quality available every day and every minute for everybody in real time. And so there's no reason why I can get the weather forecast, the radar map on this thing in real time, and look, there comes the storm, and not be out on the river and actually get the water quality on a map of the water quality live and
say, we're going in, boyo.
Yeah, and now it's time. You can jump in right now, or not, So
Is science really that good? You're not going to jump into a pot of, we'll be swearing at you, or not?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely at a time where we can use more of it.
Yeah.
We're seeing it being done everywhere for weather,
Yeah.
You can get everything on the cell phone. Let's put the environmental data on there and get it to the people.
It's fantastic. Maybe up next to the Sitco sign, you could have a map of the river with green spots for where you can I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, bravo. And Megan, one from you. Magazine Beach.
Right. Well, we'll get to Magazine Beach.
Oh.
First, I just want to put our futurism in perspective. My mother and my parents lived in Cambridge for a little while, shortly after World War II. My mother worked for the Cambridge Planning Office, and she was set to work in designing a pamphlet about what would Cambridge be like 50 years from then, so around the year 2000. And this pamphlet was called, you'll appreciate this, Smart People Will Always Live in Cambridge. And here's what was going to be going on with the river. The riverfront along the Charles has long since been turned over completely to recreation. A wide parkway drive, flanked by innumerable parking spaces, replaces the congested traffic flow of the old Memorial Drive. Picnic grounds, amphitheater, and bathing beaches replace the stone embankment. And this is the most unusual thing. Bridges will be replaced by tunnels, leaving an uninterrupted stretch of river, a piece of open countryside in the city. So that's what was supposed to happen. Didn't all happen. So Magazine Beach, thinking about that place along the river, it actually happens, as many of you know, that they're seeking opinions about what to do with the Powder Magazine, this building, a stone building that was erected in 1818 to hold ammunition, the oldest building still standing on the Charles River Basin. It was a bathhouse for a while until the water quality got too bad, and then it was used for offices and storage. So what to do with this? My idea is to construct a peace pavilion in what was the munitions center, and honoring what I think is a very strong tradition in Cambridge of peace movements and human rights initiatives. The first goal, though, would be to make this actually a peaceful place, and I think we have to enlist the Google technologists in finding a way to cancel the noise at that. It's probably one of the noisiest parts of the river because it's very narrow between there and the, I guess, is it Brighton or Alston side, where the Soldiers Field Road runs very close to the river, and that sound just comes booming over to you. It's hard to really enjoy that part of the river. So we need sound cancellation, noise cancellation on Magazine Beach. Turn that over to the Google staff. And then this peace pavilion. It would be a indoor-outdoor cafe and an exhibit space with informational panels and rotating video installations, honoring and illustrating such Cambridge movements and residents as Helen Keller, who attended the Cambridge School and graduated from Radcliffe, and as an adult campaigned tirelessly for peace and workers' rights. Sarah Chapman Bull, maybe you know about her. She brought Vedanta Buddhism to the United States. anti-war and anti-draft protests of the 60s, the New Words Bookstore, Bread and Roses, Our Bodies, Ourselves collectives, Union of Concerned Scientists, which started at MIT, and Brother Blue and other street artists. All of these, I think we could be, have, joggers and walkers and cafeistas could all stop and listen and see and think about the very strong commitment of Cambridge to peace and international understanding and human rights.
Amen. Bravo. 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 Peace, love, noise cancellation, Helen Keller, Brother Blue. What a treat to first hear you take us back through the essays that you wrote for this beautiful book, and then hear your suggestions about how things might be, maybe soon, maybe never, but maybe. And thank you to you all. Liza Ketchum, Peter Howe, Nancy Seasholes, Florence Ladd, Ferdy Hellweger, Megan Marshall. Shall we do this one? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to ask you guys to take your leave, and we'll bring up the second shift and do a little more. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's all right. Yeah, I get it. That's fine. Great. Renee Loth and Carl Hageland and Bill Ron, come on down. No, it doesn't matter. If you can find a mic, we got to grab one of those. Great. Where's our? Yes, good. Okay. Bill is here. Good. We're going to dive on in with. This was sort of our. No, amateur is the wrong word for our last line, but our layman isn't even the right word. Our first round of beauties was the right word, I think. And now we go to our pros with some more ideas about improving the future of the parklands. Let me introduce Bill Ron, architect whose landmark buildings include the new Cambridge Public Library, Ozawa Hall at Tanglewood, residential towers at Northeastern and at the Berkeley School of Music, and Tata Hall on the Charles River at the Harvard Business School. He's going to talk about Tata Hall and a future vision for architecture along the river. Hold that thought, Bill. Carl Hageland, senior planner at the DCR and historian of the Charles River Basin, author of Inventing the Charles. We'll talk about the development of North Point and the lost half mile of the Lower Charles. And Renee Loth, my dear Renee Loth, editor of Architecture Boston from the Boston Society of Architects and former editorial page editor at the Boston Globe, will talk about the opportunities presented by the realignment of I-90 in Allston for expanded parklands and better access to the river. Is there an order that makes sense here? Does it matter?
I don't know.
Was that good? Bill, do you want to
I'm
dive?
the bad guy, I think.
You're the bad guy?
About architecture, right?
Well, so
About buildings.
take us away to architecture.
No. Sitting here, it was really good for me to watch the preceding group, and they were talking about people spaces, how we all can enjoy the Charles, and here I'm worrying about the shaping of buildings, and I'm sure most people in this room would say, let's just not have any buildings along the Charles. I would also add that sitting here and looking at the slides, the Google slides, the buildings don't serve the river very well.
Many do not, but not all.
Not all, and I'll try to talk about a couple that might be better, but a huge number in these photos look imposing and problematic, particularly the big ones, and with the big ones with very strong sides. And so let me just say a couple things. When we were hired by the Harvard Business School to do a new executive education center, what's called Tata Hall, which is right at the south end of the Weeks Bridge. We had this, in my mind, a wonderful intellectual opportunity to say what kind of building should be along the edge of the river. Now, granted, we're separated from the river by Soldiers Field Road, but nonetheless, it still would have sense of the river. Also, this was the last piece of open space on Harvard's Boston side that we were going to fill with building. The only remaining is that alley that leads up to the Baker Library at the business school. And out of that came a sense on our part that we should save as much green space as we could on the riverside, not on the Harvard Business School side, but on the riverside, as a statement that this building was giving back to the river and also creating a shape that was welcoming. And so we chose a concave shape, and I talk about it in River Stories. And you know, we got a huge amount of grief from everyone. Why aren't you building the building so it's shaping like the river, which would be concave? The river's curving at that moment. And of course, I feel even more strongly today than I did 5 years ago that would have created an immense wall to the river and done exactly what I don't think buildings should do near riverside. So the Tata Hall certainly was a sense of the concave shape, the outreach of two arms, welcoming you, even as Catherine Henn pointed out, it's kind of still hard to get in that Harvard building if you're just walking by. But and it reminded me of one of a really great building by a great architect, Baker House at MIT by Alvar Aalto, built in 1948. And of course, he has an S curve to it. It's an S curve that actually has two concave curves and a slight convex curve facing the river. Now he was often quoted, but it's a really brilliant building. He was always often quoted as saying the reason he did that is if you build a building flat against the river, all you're looking out is across the river, and you're not getting any sense of the activity, the flow. And by doing the S curve, all the bedrooms, this is a dorm, all the bedrooms are looking at an oblique angle, and it's a much more powerful way to experience a river. Knowing that, of course, helped us on Tata Hall because we were trying to do the same thing. But the rest of the river you look at is not doing that. And so, and then I'll close and let my colleagues talk, but I've been a longtime member of the Boston Civic Design Commission. We review projects, any large-scale projects in the city. And over the last 25 years, we've been reviewing these projects at Boston University. And with all due respect to Boston University people here, what they've done upstream from their historic campus is these huge apartment buildings that are 20, 22 stories high. And the problem is not one of them, because one of them could be beautiful, but and they have plans to put 5 of them. There are 3 of them now. And that's a wall. That's the Miami beachification of the Charles River. So I think it behooves us to recognize that there's going to be huge pressure on the Charles from people who want to build along its edge and take advantage in a selfish way, perhaps, of those views. And we have to come up with ways to deal with that. I will say the Harvard houses, I didn't go to Harvard College, but so I always have to think through the names, but maybe someone can, Dunster and Lowell, okay. And Winthrop's where my partner was. Those are the equivalent of concave curves looking at the river. There are a couple efforts on the MIT campus to do the same. But by and large, people are building up quite straight buildings along the river, and we, with Renata's help, have to decide how to deal with that.
May I ask you, before you give it up, just to give us in 25 or 50 or whatever the number is, words or less, Bill Ron's fundamental principles of right design for riverside architecture. You alluding to a basic theory of what the approach ought to be.
Yeah. It's interesting. 20 years ago, I did a couple pieces. The Globe had one talking about the same question about whether it was riversides or harborsides. Or I do think it's better to have buildings perpendicular to the river or to the harbor than parallel, because two things happen. One is twice as many people get the view, and the other is it leaves space between the buildings so the next group of people behind you can still enjoy the river. That's my 50-word answer.
Wonderful. Bill Ron, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Carl, with your vast experience of the river and so much more, what's on your mind as you look out tonight?
I was asked to talk about the lost half mile, which is just downstream of here below the Science Museum. And I want to begin by saying this story owes a great deal to Bill Ron and the Bridge Design Review Committee of 1990, and to Peter Howe and the Boston Globe. And
Tony Tangero's in the room too. He was part of that.
So the Lost Half Mile was created 150 years ago, when more than half of that portion of the river was covered by railroad bridges, sidings, and warehouses. In a landmark book in 1960 titled The Image of the City, the MIT planning professor Kevin Lynch interviewed 30 Boston residents. Although his subjects described many more memorable places in Boston and Cambridge, none of them was able to make a visual connection between the Charles River and Boston Harbor. When a court order directed the city of Boston to build a new jail a few years later, the only site that no one objected to in the city was the riverfront site of the Registry of Motor Vehicles. Try explaining that to visitors from out of state or out of the country. Then came the Big Dig. A remarkable group of volunteers, including a number of the city's architects and planners, took up the question of crossing the Charles and met literally almost every week for over a year. With the help of the Swiss engineer Christian Menn, Boston learned about cable-stayed bridges and then built one across the Charles, which opened 12 years later. Remember that number 12. The artery also committed to a master plan and the construction of 40 acres of new public space up and downstream of the Zakim Bridge. In 1992, a Citizens Advisory Committee began a master planning process with the help of the Cambridge firm Carr Lynch and Sandell. In the meantime, Bill Geary, the commissioner of the Metropolitan District Commission in the 1980s, used to tell developers, "We bring you your front yard." Congress Group Ventures took up his challenge, bought the land, bought a parcel at North Point, and completed 3 tall buildings in 1997. Still surrounded by old, dilapidated one-story warehouses. The park construction moved very slowly, and Congress Group's lender, GE Capital, phoned the parks agency, my phone, every 6 months to ask if the park was really going to ever happen. That same year, 1997, the sculptor Nancy Schoen learned that skateboarders were skating on, over, and around her Tortoise and the Hare in Copley Square. She came to the Parks Agency and asked if a skate park could be included in the new open space. Then she connected with Renata, and the Conservancy patiently worked through another lengthy process, actually a little longer than 12 years, finally finished just last month. In about One of the planners at DCR has said that the skate park may have more people per minute per square foot than any other park in the Commonwealth. They are there at 8:30 in the morning and at 9 o'clock at night. Finally, in about 2001, as Peter Howe alluded to, the Citizens Advisory Committee learned about sinusoidal tubular steel truss bridges. Think of sine curves. And 11 years later, the ribbon was cut for the first pedestrian bridge to connect Charlestown not only with Cambridge, but all the way upriver to Newton. And that's the story of the Lost Half Mile being created by a lot of Boston volunteers who joined to bring it together.
And Carl Hagelin right in the middle of all that. Carl, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go to sleep tonight saying sinusoidal tubular steel. That's really great. Renee, take us on.
Okay, well, this is for the Brighton side of the river. And I too want to thank Renata for all the great work you do and for this beautiful publication. I think I was in the first edition, wrote in the first edition of this beautiful river stories. You know, I came to Boston at age 17 to go to college, and like the shad, I imprinted on this town completely. I've never lived anywhere else. I've all these many, perhaps 40 odd years, mostly lived in Brighton and Allston. I still live in Brighton and Oak Square, but in the 80s, I rented half of a two-family house in North Allston, the neighborhood over by the Harvard Stadium that has been completely and radically redone by the city building powers of Harvard University. And then, as now, you know, the river was a refuge for me. I was a member of the Christian Herder Community Garden over there and spent many restorative hours tending to my tomatoes there. I, even in 1982, swam the Charles, and way back then, and lived to write about it in the pages of the Boston Phoenix. So like everyone here, I love the Charles River, and I want to see it thrive. And right now, we are faced with an opportunity to reshape this area, one of the greatest opportunities in a generation, really, to be part of what's called the Beacon Yards project. And shape it to our needs and our desires, more so than necessarily Harvard's or the Transportation Department or another big institution. So as many of you probably know, Beacon Yards is sort of shorthand for a massive project that the state is undertaking over the next, 7 to 10 years. They plan to remake a huge swath of the Massachusetts Turnpike from the Allston tolls onwards. They want to straighten out this inefficient curve that many of you are familiar with on the Pike, and take down the physical toll plaza and make it a better and safer experience of driving. But it also presents us with an opportunity to make a better experience for pedestrians and for bicyclists, and just to reveal a large amount, many hundreds, perhaps dozens certainly, of acres of developable land for the first time. I wrote something down here about this. You know, the project holds a promise to, for one thing, repair a scar that runs through the neighborhood, from cutting off North Allston from the rest of Allston, very much like the Big Dig created, healed a scar that the Central Artery had, cut through the city of Boston down by the financial district and down through the North End. The Beacon Yards project has the potential to lower, there's a viaduct there, the elevated part of the Mass Pike there could be re-engineered so that it was lowered to be at grade, not submerged like the Big Dig, but at grade, and this would really improve the connections between those different parts of the neighborhood and access to the river, which is now very dangerous and very difficult. So it's just an opportunity to affect public policy and urban design. The Charles River watershed, the Charles River Conservancy, we're here to celebrate tonight, and the Watershed Association, and all of these great agencies that care about the river, have done a really good job of trying to protect access and continuous access to the river and its riverfront, as the state is remaking all of the bridges along the Charles River. So this is just another opportunity to affect public policy and urban design, and I hope everybody becomes involved. I think that if we, if it's done right, if it's done with people in mind, I think that urban placemaking can be woven into road building, which is now the primary focus of the highway engineers who are working on the Allston, the Beacon Yards project and the highway project, and if we all get together and if the association helps, and with the help of Renata, who's such a force of nature, everybody knows, we can, I think, have the highway designed around the neighborhoods instead of the other way around.
I love it. I love it. Renee Lott, thank you so much. Thank you.
That's my editorial.
I love it. A highway designed around the neighborhoods instead of the other way around. That's perfect. Renee, my beautiful, full-grown, shad-like, imprinted creature woman. I could listen to you talk about the Beacon Yards all night. That's just great. Renee and Carl and Bill, thank you very much. Yes, Bill.
Let me just say one thing that follows from what my two colleagues have just said. The reason the Zakin Bridge got built as it did, aesthetically, is that early in that project, someone tossed out the idea, well, shouldn't we be worried about a bridge? We were dealing with issues of what became, a $12 billion project. The Scheme Z was part of. And a couple of people said, why can't we think a little about the bridge? And it might have cost us, let's say it cost us $100,000 or $200,000 to bring Christian men over from Switzerland to come up with a proposal. And let's say that bridge cost another $1 million more than a normal bridge. Out of $12 billion, it was nothing, and no one opposed us. In other words, they wanted to keep us happy, of course, but no one opposed us. And
when they saw the design, you mean?
Yeah, when they saw the design,
So dream
they
big.
didn't start saying this is wasteful. It's going to kill the project.
Mm-hmm.
None of that happened because it was such a small amount. So for Renee, I challenged Renee and Renata to come up with a plan that will cost, a couple $1 million and be far less, such a small amount of money compared to what the road builders are going to build on the Mass Pike, that you could probably get it approved.
Yes, and I think actually the some estimate, I can't get the numbers right now, that lowering that viaduct would actually be more cost effective than, because it needs to be repaired all the time now when it's elevated. And what this could do would be to open up a whole, this to talk about dreaming big, a whole kind of new esplanade for Alston, that would be, vast amount of open space there, and not the sort of cramped and beautiful but cramped area that we have now. So, yeah. Dream big.
An esplanade for Alston. That is a very sexy idea. And ladies and gentlemen, you have seen Bill Ron throw down at the feet of Renata and Renee tonight. So back here 7 years from tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you. And Renata, back to you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Renee and Carl and Bill.
Tom and all the speakers, this is just amazing. I could listen here for hours. It's like when Carl takes you on a boat tour and he speaks, and I could just listen to him over and over. So I'm glad. I think this event has been filmed. So if you want to keep on dreaming, I hope you can go back. I also want to recognize a few people in the room. Did Jay Livingstone make it here? He had planned to come here, our state rep. I guess not. But I want to recognize some of our partners. Bob Zimmerman has been mentioned several times. Thank you, Bob, for coming tonight. We partner on many things together. And thank you for being here tonight. We also, I think Tony Pangaro is here tonight. He was mentioned earlier. He is on the executive board of the Esplanade Association, another group we partner with on a regular basis. And I just want to recognize some people of the Conservancy. Here we have the chair, Deborah Isles. And we also have Gina Foote, who's on the board, Joan Pickett, Catherine Henn, Ron Axelrod. Thank you all for being such wonderful, hardworking board members. So what's coming? Thank you. So we're almost at the dessert stage, but I just want to make sure you know that a nonprofit only functions with people like you supporting it. So I hope you will continue to support our work. and you've done that tonight because we have big plans. You can, of course, take your company and be a volunteer with Sasha Valliere. She's here, our volunteer coordinator back there. And she has started a wonderful new program. She was approached by an organization called YES, Youth Empowerment Service, and they said, could you work with young people? And they earn a skateboard by doing landscaping work. And so now they loved that so much, they were given their skateboards at the opening. So now we're going to expand that program. So we kind of do some witty, wonderful things. Thank you, Sasha. Our advocacy, we continue our advocacy work, and Renee, I think we have quite a bit of work to do with the I-90. It's a wonderful, I spent 3 hours and 40 minutes 2 nights ago in the Horace Mann High School in Alston, and the number of thoughtful speeches there. Fred Salvucci spoke there, and just amazing all the thoughtfulness that is going in there and the opportunity we have. So I think we have a lot to do. I also want to point out Rick Bowers. Where are you? Rick Bowers, where are you? He had to leave. Anyway, he is the new president of the Charles River Alliance, a new group that we are working with to make that public-private partnership more effective. And as you know, DCR, as of yesterday, has a new commissioner, Leo Roy. I spoke with him today, and I explained to him we want to work closer with the municipalities because the DCR can't do it alone. We need to bring Cambridge, Boston, Newton, Watertown, Brookline into the picture, and we need to work with them. So we look forward to doing that, and Rick Bowers is heading that effort. So thank you for coming tonight, and make sure you don't leave with a whole bundle of river stories for all your friends. And I want to thank Google again for all this hospitality. Thank you very much.